Rabbi began the Farbrengen this afternoon, and right away in the first Sicha, he spoke regarding to the Siyam HaSefer Torah which took place here on Thursday afternoon. All the Shluchim from all over the world have joined in writing the Sefer Torah with Schus the Rebbe, and the completion of the Sefer Torah was on this past Thursday, when it was the day of the Shloishim of the passing of the Rebbetzin, Schus HaTogen Aleinu. Today was the first time that this Sefer Torah was used, and the Rebbe began the Farbrengen referring to the Siyam Sefer Torah that has taken place. And right away the Rebbe went on saying that this Siyam Sefer Torah is a very special one. Why? Because it represents in the Sefer Torah the participation of those that wrote the Sefer Torah are representing many cities and many countries. In Bechlal we are just leaving Purim, and in the Megillah we find how the Megillah brings out, and many times in the Megillah, the beginning of the Megillah as well as the end of the Megillah, how the Megillah brings out Medina, always stressing various different countries. Achashverosh ruled over 127 countries, so we see that in Torah there is room to say that there is a concept of one country and another country and so forth. Now when we have this Sefer Torah that was written here, this was written by people who represent many cities and many countries. While mentioning the inyan of Achashverosh ruling on 127 Medinas, the Rebbe says that it's brought in Svarim that this has a shayches to the life of Sarah, that Sarah lived 127 years. But by Achashverosh we find it in Mokoin, in place. The inyan of Sarah, there it's an inyan, her lifespan was 127 years, so there it is, the inyan of 127 in Zman, in time. But regardless, this is an inyan of a siyam of a Sefer Torah, and this Sefer Torah goes back to the very first Sefer Torah, because the system of writing Sefer Torah says that a Sefer Torah is written and it's copied from a previous written Sefer Torah, and the previous written Sefer Torah was copied from the one that which was before that. So actually, this makes it that every Sefer Torah really traces back all the way to the first Sefer Torah which the Yidden had from Moshe Rabbeinu. In Chazal we find that when the Rebbe gave the Torah to the Yidden, the expression was Chemdo Gnuza. The Rebbe said he had a hidden treasure, and he consulted with the Malachim whether to give it to the Yidden or not. And as we find in Gemara, the Gemara tells us that the Malachim were claiming that the Rabbeinu Shalom should not give it to Yidden, that it should remain by them. But nonetheless, the Rebbe took this Chemda Gnuza, this very dear and precious treasure, and he gave it to whom? And he gave it to the Yidden. So the Rebbe explained, we find in Chazal that the others, as well as the Shvatim, they all learned Torah. They learned Torah, they were mekayim the mitzvahs of Torah. So actually, why is the Rebbe referring to the Torah as a Chemda Gnuza, as a hidden treasure, at the time that this treasure was no longer hidden? Why? Because the others had access to it, so did the Shvatim, and they learned Torah, and they fulfilled the mitzvahs of Torah. So why does the Rebbe refer to it as a Chemda Gnuza? And basically what the Rebbe answered was that true, the others learned Torah, they were mekayim Torah. However, the etzem of Torah, the essence of Torah, in this madrega, how Torah is referred to as Chemda Gnuza, a hidden treasure, this Taka the others did not have. This is something which was revealed by Matan Torah. When the Rebbe gave Yidden the Torah, that is when He revealed to Yidden the essence of Torah. Torah, how it's in the level of Chemda Gnuza, a hidden treasure. This was given only to Yidden. And it was here in this Sikha somewhere where the Rebbe was mentioning the Inyan of Medina, how we find the division of countries, how it's spelled out in the Megillah very clearly. Here the Rebbe brought a taich from the Baal Shem Tov. That the Baal Shem Tov taich is, Mishnah says, HaKoires HaMegillah Lemafreya Lo Yotza. The simple meaning of it is, if somebody would read the Megillah, and he would read it backwards, he's not Yotza. In other words, instead of reading Vayhi Me'ach HaShveirosh, he would begin with the last words, and would read the last word first, and go backwards. So naturally, he's not Yotza, because we're not getting the contents of the Megillah. The Baal Shem Tov taiched, HaKoires HaMegillah Lemafreya. If somebody reads the Megillah, and he looks at the Megillah, his attitude towards the Megillah is that it's Lemafreya. It's something that has taken place many years ago. However, there is no lesson, there is no meaning to the whole story of the Megillah to us now. When someone takes the Megillah in such an attitude, is lo yotza, then he's not yotza. That means he's not getting the message of what the Megillah is all about. In fact, the whole union of the Megillah that Rebbe stressed at lunch today is that v'zichrom lo yosuf mizaram, that the entire story remains with us and will never part from our children, to the extent, the Gemara tells us, that the final stage of Matan Torah was by Megillas Esther. Because by Matan Torah, the Rebbe kind of forced the Yidden to accept the Torah. What do Chazal tell us? Kofa aleim har kigigis. That the Rebbe raised a mountain above the Yidden, and he told them, will they be willing to accept the Torah? Fine. Otherwise, kind of like forced them to it. Otherwise, he said, this is on this spot, this is where you will remain. When it came by Megillas Esther, the Megillah tells us, Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim eis asher echelu lasos. Here the Yidden really accepted upon them what they once began doing. So Chazal interpret, what does this mean? It means that the Yidden here accepted, Kiblu aleim, they've accepted upon them what they once began. In other words, what they began by Matan Torah. Here, by the time of Mordechai Esther, by the time of Purim, here it was a full, wholehearted Kabbalah HaTorah. Here it was without anybody forcing them, from their own will, from their own desire, they were willing to be mekabel the entire Torah upon themselves. And all of this came as a result of Purim. So Memela, we can understand what the message of Purim is. That Purim is not something which is only lemafreya, something which once happened, once transpired, and has no shaykhs, there's no message, there's nothing relevant in it today. Definitely not so. On the contrary, there are hayras, there are lessons which constantly we can be taking out from Purim, as the Rebbe always stresses, based on a pasuk in the Megillah, Va'ayomim ha'elu niskarim v'nasim. These days are reminded and they are redone. What does it mean? It means that when it comes these days, it's a suitable time to take a hira, to take a lesson from the Yontif of Purim. Then the Rebbe went on, continued later, regarding getting back to the inyan of Sefer Torah, that this Sefer Torah has a specialty in it. And the specialty of this Sefer Torah is that the Sefer Torah was written by shluchim. First he explained that it's written by individuals who represent many cities and many countries. Now we are going a step further. Who are these individuals? These individuals are shluchim. Bechlal, the inyan of shlichus, Rabbi says, is something which is very, very dear, very chashev. Even the entire Torah is a shliach from the Rebbe. Mitzvahs, Chazal tell us, there's an expression in the Medrash, kabdu es ha-mitzvahs shehein shluchai. The Rebbe says, honor the mitzvahs, respect the mitzvahs, because the mitzvahs are my shluchim. The mitzvahs are the emissaries of the Rebbe. So are mitzvahs, and so is Torah. The entire union of Torah is like a shlichus. What's the pshat of shlichus? A shlichus is someone or something which was sent from one place to another. Torah originated min hashamayim, and the Rebishter has sent down Torah into this world. So we all know the famous explained in Chassidus regarding Matan Torah, that prior to Matan Torah there was a boundary between Gashmias and Ruchnias. What did Matan Torah accomplish? It took away this boundary, took away the border between Gashmias and Ruchnias. And the Rebishter said, Vani Amaschel, he is the first one to open the borders, to make give free access from Ruchnias to Gashmias. Mamela, the whole union of Matan Torah is Torah came down from Shamayim into Eretz here. And the same regarding mitzvahs. The Rebbe is saying now, there's an interesting medrash, the Rebbe says. And medrash, it's a medrash, and everybody goes by this medrash, very bypassing it, not really stressing it. In the Torah we find how the Yidden were counted. The various Shvatim, the various tribes of Yidden were counted. If we look at the total number in every Shevet, we will notice, Rebbe says, that Shevet Levi is the smallest in population of all the Shvat. So the Medrash explains it. The reason why Shevet Levi is the least in population, Medrash says, because the Yidden were all involved in Shibud Mitzrayim. The Yidden all were slaves in Mitzrayim. So, like the pasuk says in the beginning of Shmois, "V'chasher yanu oisoi kein yirbe v'chein yifroitz." They multiplied as a result of them being tortured. As the more they were tortured, kein yirbe v'chein yifroitz, the more they multiplied. Being that Shevet Levi was not in Shibud Mitzrayim, so that is why the Medrash says they were lacking this fact of multiplication. So that is why when it came later to count and get a final count of how many people are in each Shevet, Shevet Levi's came out to be the smallest Shevet. He says, what do we see from here? From here we see that the inyan of Yirbe and Yifreitz, the inyan of being multiplied, comes as a result from going through problems of Kasha Yanu Oisai. This leads to Kein Yirbe v'Kein Yifreitz. Rebbe says there are those shluchim. We use the expression in Yiddish, memurmult. Murmult means kind of like they're mumbling. They're not saying it, but not saying it on one says something under his nose, like the expression in Yiddish would be a murmult. In other words, they are complaining that they are not having the proper comfort as they really would want to have. And they are complaining about this. The Rebbe says this is the lesson which we take here from Shevet Levi. On the contrary, when one is lacking in the proper comfort, this is what it leads to Kein Yirbe, v'chein Yifroitz, that they will be benched. And here the Rebbe spoke very warm words regarding Shluchim, that there is a special merit, special schusim, and special nesinas koyach, special authorities that are related to the shluchim. And there's a special responsibility, the Rebbe said, there's a special achrayus that's on each and every one of the shvatim, of the shluchim. And together with it, they are also worthy of the bracha. Takim etzad the problems that they're going through, and yonim that are not as smooth as they would want it to be. So the Rebishter rewards them, like we find in the Torah, Kein Yirbe v'chein Yifreitz. It's also in these sichas where the Rebbe explained that in Torah, we know that there's the written Torah, there's Oisius HaKsiva. We know there's Oisius HaChkika, there are Oisius of engraving. And we know Chassidus explains at length the difference between writing and engraving. And then we have how the oisiyos are in Torah Shebal Peh. We have it how it stands in Torah Shebiksav, in the written Torah, and then we have how it is in the oral Torah. So in the oral Torah, there every letter is not so important. Neither is it so important, neither is every letter accounted for that much as it is accounted for in the written Torah. In Torah Shebiksav, every letter, in Pepel Mamish, every single letter, this is the halachas of a kosher Sefer Torah. That in order for it to be a kosher Sefer Torah, every single letter has to be written accurately and properly, and every letter has its hakbala, and you're supposed to have the proper space between one letter and another, and the proper space between one word and another word. In other words, what the Rebbe is bringing out, that it's dafke in the oisiyos of ksiva. Here we're not talking, normally, regularly in Chassidus, when we explain the difference between the written Torah and in engraved letters, we always bring out the advantage of engraving. Here the Rebbe is bringing out the advantage of the written Torah, that it is dafke in this written Torah, where the Rebishter has related all of these detailed halachas, and it has all of these detailed halachas have to be fulfilled, and dafke then it is a kosher Sefer Torah. Today is also Parshas Porah. Parshas Porah always comes before Parshas HaChodesh. The reason for it is in Parshas Porah we read how the Porah Aduma would make Toher, would make pure a person who was Tameh. So in order, being that we are before Pesach, and in order that we should be able to be Makriv the Pesach, B'tahara and purity, so that's how it originated, that before Parshas HaChodesh, in other words, it is always the last Shabbos in Adar. Though we should always have, it is either the last Shabbos in Adar, when Rosh Chodesh Nisan comes out to be on a Shabbos. When Rosh Chodesh Nisan is not on a Shabbos, then Shabbos Mevorchen Nisan is already Parshas HaChodesh, and the Shabbos after Purim, the Shabbos before that, is Parshas Porah. The Rebbe says, and this is what this Shabbos is referred to, Take, as Shabbos Parshas Porah. So many calendars have the Vayakhel-Pekudei in a parentheses, or even in small letters. What do they have in bigger lettering, or without the parentheses, the fact that this Shabbos is Parshas Porah. Mm-hmm. So this is the whole union of Parshas Porah, to bring taro, to bring purity, so that when it comes to Korban Pesach, every Yid is obligated to be makriv the Korban Pesach. The Rebbe explained that when the Torah uses the expression Zois Chukas HaTorah, we find it in two exceptions. We find Zois Chukas HaTorah when the Torah talks about Porah Aduma, and we also find Zois Chukas HaTorah when the Torah talks about Korban Pesach. So there's something in common between these two, and as we are explaining it now, it is the Shabbos before we enter Nisan that we are told the halachas of becoming pure, of becoming tahor, so that we are makrev the Korban Pesach b'tar. The Rebbe brought in Svarim a siman, a way to remember this. It's brought in Svarim between the third and fourth kois. We are not allowed to be mafsik with drinking any other liquid. So the same thing they say, we're not, there's no hafsake with drinking any other, we're not allowed to drink wine between the third and fourth kais of the Dalet kaises. Parshas Porah and Parshas HaChodesh are the third and fourth of the Dalet Parshias. First we have Shkolim and Zocha. Then we have Porah and HaChodesh. So it's brought in Sfarim that bein Gimel Dalet there is no hefsek. They always go one following the other. First comes Parshas Porah, and afterwards we always have Parshas HaChodesh. And there is never a Shabbos in between, an open Shabbos in between. Bein Gimel Dalet lo yafsek. However, Rabbi says, we are hoping for the coming of Mashiach. Rabbi Yeredan, even those housewives that are putting in efforts already to clean up the houses for Pesach, he's sure that they also will not mind that Mashiach will surprise us and Mashiach will come for Pesach. And we will all together join with Mashiach and go to Eretz Yisrael. So when we will all come to Eretz Yisrael, we will have to be makriv the Korban Pesach. We're not going to be toher. We're going to be lacking. We're not even going to have an opportunity to have the Parah Aduma and make a Parah Aduma and have the Parah Aduma sprinkled upon us. Throughout the Farbrengen, many times the Rebbe mentioned that throughout Jewish history there were 9 Parah Adumas. At the 10th one we will be making, the 10th one will be done when Mashiach will come with the Gula Asida. So by us now, we are the reading of Pashas Parah today. This is actually a preparation for the 10th Parah Aduma. But regardless, when Mashiach will come, even though we will not be pure, here comes in a halacha that a Korban Pesach, when the entire tzibur, or even most of the tzibur, is not tahir, we do not postpone it for Pesach Sheni. Normally, if an individual is not tahir, on the 14th of Nisan, when we have to be makriv the Korban Pesach, if he's not tahir then he is postponed with his Korban Pesach for the 14th of Iyar, a month later, Pesach Sheni. However, when most of the tzibur, when most of the community, or even if the entire community, avada, but not even that, even if most of the tzibur is not bitara, like the case when we are now, and Mashiach will come, and we will have to be makriv the Korban Pesach, so here it will not be postponed. We will be able to be makriv the Korban Pesach right away. Why? Because there's a halacha that tumah, the halachas of tumah, are pushed aside when it involves an entire tzibur, when it involves an entire community. I'm talking in this sikha, the Rebbe referred very strongly also to what Chazal talk about children, bonim shegolu mishulchan aviyim, children that have been driven away from their father's table. And the same thing, Yidden in Golas. We have been driven away from home. From our home, we're not at home, we're not at our father's table, and it's definitely the highest point that the Rebbe should take us already out of Golas, and let him take us out of Golas. And even if we wouldn't have the Parah Aduma already to sprinkle upon us the ashes of Parah Aduma, we will still be able to be makriv the Korban Pesach based on the halacha that tumah is pushed aside when it involves an entire tzibur. Here in the second half of the Farbrengen, Rebbe spoke very strongly based on the pasuk V'hachai yitein el liboy. This is a pasuk which is brought in the Rambam. The Rebbe has referred to this pasuk many times throughout the entire month. The Rambam explains this pasuk regarding when something undesirable happens and somebody, Chmon al-Islam, passes away in a family. So the Rambam brings in the concept of the hachai yiten el liboy. Those who are left alive, remained alive, yiten el liboy, it is our obligation to, literal translation would be to give it to our hearts. It's a proper time to make a proper evaluation, a cheshbon nefesh, an inyan of tshuva, yitein el liboy, to give it to our hearts a little bit. And it is throughout the entire month since the passing of the Rebbetzin. In fact, it was the very first day the Rebbe came back and the Rebbe spoke after Mincha, and that day the Rebbe concluded with the concept of a hachai yitein el liboy. And the Rebbe added on, especially when the first name of the Nifteres was Chaya. Rebbetzon's name was Chaya Mushka, especially when the first name of the Nifteres was Chaya. And as the Rebbe continued today, based on what he spoke one day this week, I think it was Wednesday, the Rebbe spoke Wednesday night and Thursday night from his house. And Wednesday the Rebbe began, he says, actually, what happened was, it was an incident which we can refer to as a ma'ira prati, a personal incident that happened to a person, to an individual, private individual. And nonetheless, we are talking about it and involving so many of Klal Yisrael in this inyan that has happened. So the Rebbe explained it Wednesday night and spoke about this inyan today again. that true Take, it is only one person, one member of Klal Yisrael, but by Yidden we see that every single member of Klal Yisrael Take affects entire Klal Yisrael. And the Rebbe brought an example. The Rebbe brought an example from a young child. A young boy who was being trained to wear tzitzis. And he's putting on a talis cotton. What do we tell this child? That by putting on the talis cotton, what will be the effect of the talis cotton? As the Torah itself tells us. That by putting on a talis cotton, this will lead to it, that the child who's wearing the talis cotton, this will remind him on all of the mitzvahs of the Rebishter. Obviously, it's a small, one individual act, done by one person, by one child. Not even an adult, a child. And what do we say? That this one act of one child can lead and have such an effect that that it will lead to it that he will remember all of the 613 mitzvahs of the Rebbe. Wednesday night the Rebbe also brought in another example. The Rebbe said, let us touch up the words of Kaddish. In fact, the Rebbe mentioned that Kaddish originated when Chachamim were mesaken the text of Yiskadal v'Yiskada Shmei Rabbah. It was originally made, we shouldn't know from it, when a small child is left as an orphan. When a child loses his father or mother, Rachmana litzlan, it shouldn't happen, for then the Chachamim made the text of Kaddish. Later it was also adopted by adults, that adults also say Kaddish. But originally it was made up for a child. What do we say? What are the opening words of this tefillah? Yisgadal v'yiskadash Shmei Rabbah. Let it become great and let it become holy. Shmei Rabbah, the great name. Again, this tefillah is recited on the passing away of one individual. Who is the one that's reciting this tefillah? We shouldn't know from it, a child. Rachmana litzlan lost a father or a mother, and he's reciting this tefillah. What is he saying? Yisgadal v'yiskadash Shmei Rabbah. That by him saying these words, greatness and kedusha is being added to whom? To the Rebbeinu Shalom. In other words, as the Rebbe stressed, Yisgadal brings out kamus, quantity. The Rebbe becomes how great he is, he becomes yet greater. Yiskadash has to do with eichus, with quality. The Rebbe is the source of all holiness. And still we say that through this prayer of this one and only child who's getting up in shul to say it, this leads to it that what happens is Yisgadal v'Yiskadash Shmei Rabbah, the holy name of the Rebbeinu Shalom. As we go on saying later in the text, Yehei Shmei Rabbah, the great name, his name, the Rebbeinu Shalom's name, becomes Mevarach la'olam u'la'omei olmayim. The Rebbe was talking about it Wednesday night. The Rebbe says that Kaddish is not only for undesirable inyanim. It says we find by Yidden that Kaddish could be said on a happy occasion as well. By Yidden is the minhag that when Yidden learn it as a group, after Yidden are learned Shnayes or in Yankev or other such type of limudim, it is customary that a Kaddish is said afterwards. Just concluded, let us prefer having the accomplishments of Kaddish, but through happy occasions. Through an occasion of learning Torah. Torah in itself is a happy occasion, because through learning Torah, Pekudei Hashem Yishareh Mesamchei Leiv, the learning of Torah adds on joy, brings happiness, brings simcha. But like I mentioned, when he was talking about it, he was talking about the limud of Ein Yankov. Ein Yankov is, it says in the Friedrich Rebbe Siches, he refers to it how Yidden in previous generations would have a kviyas in learning Ein Yankov. Ein Yankov is a sefer which consists of all the stories that are in Gemara. So the Rebbe says, who learns Ein Yankov? Usually it is simple Jews that learn Ein Yankov. In other words, a person who is not capable of understanding a piece of Gemara. He cannot keep up with a shiur, with any deeper shiur. he is the one that usually would learn Ein Yankov. And in the shiurim, which they used to have in the shuls, in Ein Yankov, we usually geared to the simple people. As the Rebbe spoke Wednesday night, he says, somebody who could learn Daf Yomi or get deeper shir, other deeper shiurim will not get involved in a shir of Ein Yankov. Ein Yankov is a collection of all the stories that we have in Gemara. All the stories are collected in a sefer which is called Ein Yankov. But nonetheless, what it says, the Alter Rebbe says that regarding the stories that are in Gemara, which is Ein Yankov, Alter Rebbe expresses himself that the Reiv Seides HaTorah, most of the secrets that are in Torah, the Seides HaTorah, are gnuzin, are hidden in this chelik of Torah, in the Agadah B'Torah, in the chelik Agadah, in the chelik of stories in Gemara, that contains within itself most of the Seides HaTorah. So we see on one hand, it's a simple limud, something which everybody could have access to. And on the other hand, Alter Rebbe tells us that the Reiv Seides HaTorah, our gonus are hidden in the Agadah of Torah, in this chelik of Torah, and in Yankiv, in the stories of Gemara. Back to the Sikha, so the Rebbe is bringing out how, even though we're talking about one individual person, but nonetheless, this is something which is affecting everybody. Every individual Yid affects Klal Yisrael. So Memele, what has to be is V'hachai Yiten El Liboy. But it's a proper, opportune time that those alive, Yiten El Liboy, should make a proper Cheshbon HaNefesh, proper calculation. And as the Rebbe went on explaining in today's Sikha, that the Yitein El Liboy should be in all areas of serving the Rebishter, and the Rebbe demanded very strongly serving the Rebishter dafke through simcha, through joy. And simcha is a mitzvah deraisa, and this is the proper and ideal way how to serve the Rebishter. And going on in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe explained two Rashis, one in this week's Sedra and one in last week's Sedra. And also the pattern of the Rashi, explaining the Rashi, was also based on the lesson which we can derive from the Rashi as far as V'hachai Yitein El Liboy. First, let us go back to last week's Sedra. When Moshe Rabbeinu comes back and he sees how the Yidden are worshipping the Egel, the Rebbe is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, Lech Reid, go ahead and go down. And Rashi comments that the Rebbe told him, Reid Migdul Loscha. It is in Kapitel Lamed Beis Pasuk Zayin. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe, the Rebbe is telling Moshe, Lech Reid, go ahead, go down. Ki shichis amcha, your nation is spoiled. Asher lisa meretz Mitzrayim. The Yidden now worshipping the Egel. What does Rashi say? Lech Reid. Rashi is quoting a Gemara. The Gemara is where in Broches Daf Lamed Beis. Daf Leiv, the Rebbe says. Lamed Beis is Daf Leiv. It says in Tanya, we know there's a famous Perik in Tanya, which is Perik Leiv. Perik Leiv in Tanya stresses the importance of Avas Yisrael, how we are to love every single Jew. This Blat Gemara, Masechta Brachas, on Daf Leiv, is also going to tell us about the importance of Yidden, as we will soon hear. What does the Gemara there say? That the Rebbe is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, Reid Migdulascha, go down from your greatness. Loi nasati lecha gedula ela bishvilam. The only reason you became great is because of Yidden. Now that the Yidden are worshipping the Egel, so lech reid migdulascha, go down from your greatness. But a question which was raised in this Rashi, which is a very simple one, why does Rashi have to get involved in quoting the Gemara? It's a simple pasuk. Moshe was on the mountain. So the Rebbe is telling him, lech reid, go down. So there's no need for Rashi to quote the Gemara, that what is the real meaning of reid migdul oscha. It's a simple pasuk with a simple interpretation, and we would understand the pasuk very simple, even if Rashi does not quote this Gemara.
Furthermore, the question arises, actually what Rashi is explaining is the word reid, go down. Rashi, however, quotes not only the word reid, Rashi is quoting the word lech reid. Why is he quoting the word lech reid? Go down, reid. You are being lowered. This is what Rashi is trying to bring out. Rashi is trying to bring out that Moshe Rabbeinu is losing his greatness, his entire greatness he has because of the Yid, and now he's losing it. So that's stressed in the concept of reid, how he's going down. Why does Rashi also bring the word lech reid? So the Rebbe is explaining this. It is the word lech which is forcing Rashi to learn this pshat. Because if the pasuk would only be saying reid, then Rashi wouldn't get involved with this page. Reid would mean go down from the mountain. Being that there's kind of like a double expression in the pasuk, lech reid, gei arop. Gei, lech means go, reid, go down. Why does the pasuk use a double expression? So this in itself right away shows Rashi that there's something not understood here in the pasuk. And if there's something not understood here in the pasuk in the realm of pshat, the only way how we can explain it is to explain it with this Gemara. What does the Gemara here tell us? That the Rebbe is telling Moshe Rabbeinu he's going down from his greatness. Here the Rebbe says, we see how the Rebbe appreciates every Yid. Yidden here have sinned. What did they sin? They sinned with Chet HaEgel, which is a very severe sin. To the extent, the Rebbe says, Chet HaEgel is worse than Chet Eitzadas. Even though Chet Eitzadas, we are told in Chassidus that this is the first of all Averes, and this is the source of all Chatoyim. However, that was before Matan Torah. After Matan Torah, the Yidden should go ahead and commit such a crime as serving to an Egel. This is a very unusual, serious Avera. On the other hand, Moshe Rabbeinu was not present when the Yidden did it. So Moshe couldn't have even stopped it. But the Rebbe tells us in Tanya that if one could hold back somebody from doing an Avera, right away in the first parak, he brings the Gemara, and he does not hold him back from doing the Avera, he's considered a Rosh. Moshe Rabbeinu, in this case, had no way to hold the Yidden back from doing the Avera. Why? Because he just wasn't there. How many people did the Avera? 600,000 Yidden left Eretz Yisrael. Left Mitzrayim, adults. 600,000 men left Mitzrayim. We will learn weiter here in the Chazarah. We will see how many people were punished for Chet HaEgel. We will learn 3,000. What does this show us? This shows us that out of the 600,000 Yidden, adults, ages 20 to 60, how many were punished for Chet HaEgel? 3,000. Which means that it only involved a small number. So look what's happening. Look how precious every single Yid is by the Eibishter. At a time Yidden have sinned. And have sinned such severe sins, such serious sins. The Eibishter is turning to Moshe Rabbeinu and he's telling him, listen, if the Yidden are sinning, Reid Migdulascha, then you're going down from your greatness. Then I don't need you, he's telling him. Then you're not doing your mission. It's not involving that many Yidden. And Moshe couldn't have done anything about it. Moshe couldn't have done it. It wasn't in Moshe's power to do anything about it. Nonetheless, the Rebishter is so hurt and affected when a Yid sins, regardless, and the Rebishter feels for the Yid that has sinned, and it hurts the Rebishter so much that the Rebishter is turning to Moshe Rabbeinu and he's telling him, Lech reid migdulascha. If Yidden were able to sin with Chet HaEgel, the only reason I have given you L'nasati lecha gedula ela b'shvilam, only because of them. Now that the Yidden are sinning, and how many Yidden are sinning? Only 3,000 out of such a large number. So the Rebishter was so, it affected him so, he was so taken by it, that he's turning to Moshe Rabbeinu and he's telling him, Lech reid, go down from your greatness. Here the Rebbe was saying, we see how every act from every Yid is extremely meaningful and leaves its impression by the Rebbeinu Shalom. Another inyan which the Rebbe explained in today's Farbrengen was also a Rashi in today's Sedre, where the Torah tells us how the Yidden, there's the beginning of Pekudei, Kapitel Lametes Pasuk Gimel, Vayeraku es Pache Hazohov. How the Yidden, the way exactly they were taking the gold and they were working it out and making threads out of it and so forth. And Rashi explains exactly, and gives us a clear and precise picture how this was done. So the Rebbe is raising a question which was asked in Ha'aras HaTmimim, why is it dafke by this part of the work which was done in the Mishkan that Rashi is explaining in complete detail and explaining us exactly how it was done? After all, there were many other occupations which were needed for the construction of the Mishkan and everything else that it had in it. And nonetheless, Rashi never gets involved in giving us a complete detail how it happened. And here when it comes how the gold was worked out and how exactly they weaved it and they turned it into threads and so forth, Rashi is giving us a very, very clear picture how it happened. And the Rebbe also explained this inyan in Avodas Hashem. The Rebbe was talking, the lesson which we can derive from it is a Yid has gold, a piece of gold. Obviously, talking about a block of gold. What does a Yid need it for? So Chazal tell us, why was gold created? So that in order that we should be able to use it in the Beis HaMikdash. So the same the Rebbe says when we're talking nowadays as well. To tell a Yid that the block of gold that he has, he should destroy it, chas v'sholom. That's bal tashchis. That we're not allowed to do. That we're prohibited from doing. But on the other hand, what is a Yid told to do? A Yid is told that he's to take his gold and he's to work it out properly, which means he's to spend it properly, to see to it that it goes for his tuition and for tuition of his children and for all other expenses that are needed. And this is how a Yid spends his gold. This is how a Yid takes his gold and spends it in the right way, in the proper way. Rabbi also referred to the Shia Rambam of today, which today's Shia Rambam is in the halachas of Sukkah. In the halachas of Sukkah and the halachas of Daled Minim. The moral which we have in the Daled Minim is very obvious. In Daled Minim we have how the Daled Minim bring out the concept of Achdus. Nonetheless, we're talking about 4 Minim, which are 4 different categories. So we know what an Esrig stands for. It's explained. An Esrig is Yesh Bei Tam, for Yesh Bei Reach, has a taste and has a good smell. The Lulav only has a good smell, and a good taste, the Hadus is what has the good smell and not a taste, and it's the Arove that has neither a smell and neither a taste. So actually we all elaborated a lot in Svarim and Chassidus that we're talking about various categories of Yidden. There's some Yidden that fit into one category, some that fit into another category. However, what are we told? When is it considered that we have fulfilled the mitzvah properly? The mitzvah properly is fulfilled only when we unite all 4 categories. Should any one of the categories be missing, let it be the highest, let it be the lowest, a Yid cannot fulfill the mitzvah of Daled Minim. So again, this shows us the importance of Achdus Yisrael, of Avos Yisrael, and Achdus Yisrael, when Yidden love each other to the extent of total unity amongst Yidden. The Rebbe also alerted in the Farbrengen something which he has mentioned Wednesday and he's mentioned Thursday, being that we are getting ready for Pesach. It's important to remind everyone that before Pesach actually, we're supposed to contribute Mois Chitim. Mois Chitim means money for wheat. What does this actually mean? This is usually a fund that helps Yidden, those that are in need of assistance, so that they should be able to celebrate Pesach properly. So it was always by Yidden that there was public funds, and these funds would always help the needy so that they can celebrate Pesach properly. So the Rebbe stressed it today as well as during the week. We see that we know by Yidden everything is accurate. What is this fund called? The fund is called Mois Chitim, money for Chitim, which actually means for matzahs and all other needs. However, if we were to look in Shulchan Aruch, we will see that there are various categories of wheat. A flour can be made, flour that's kosher from matzis, can be made from various categories of wheat. And nonetheless, we always keep on referring to chitim. Why? Because chitim is the best and the most expensive. The top of the line when we're talking about wheat is chitim. Chitim as opposed to se'orim. What does this show us? That when we are involved in helping another Yid, we are giving him so that he should be able to celebrate Pesach properly, that he should have all his needs to have a kosher and freilich in Pesach, it is our obligation to see to it that a Yid gets from the best, and that he can celebrate his Pesach in the most best and proper way that it could only be. I will also mention that we are already going to be entering Chumash Vayikra. Vayikra begins with Vayikra el Moshe. He called to Moshe. It is not mentioned who called. Vayikra el Moshe. The pasuk does not say who. Why? Because this is such a call which is coming from such a high madrege that it cannot be spelled out who is the caller. It's coming from such a shame. The loy yisramis, loy b'shumais, v'loy b'shum kaitz. There's no way of referring to it by any title from the real atzmos of Hashem. And who is the Rebishter calling to? The Rebishter is calling to El Moshe. We all know what Alter Rebbe tells us in Tanya, that really there is a Moshe Rabbeinu in each and every person. Every Yid has a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Alter Rebbe explains this in Tanya based on the pasuk. Pasuk says, "Va'ata Yisrael, ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimach." Now Yid, it's pasuk in Chumash Dvarim. What is the Rebishter asking from you? He's only asking Ki'im liyira es Hashem. All he's asking is that you should be God-fearing. So the Gemara asks, "V'chiyira milsa zutresehi." Is then God-fearing something small? God-fearing is no kleinigkeit. You can't say all he's asking for is that we should be God-fearing. It's not so easy. So the Gemara responds, "Ein, yes, legabe Moshe milsa zutresehi." When we're talking about a person like Moshe Rabbeinu, for Moshe Rabbeinu it's not so hard. For him it's something small, something easy. So the Alter Rebbe asks in Tanya, the Torah is talking about every Yid, not only about Moshe Rabbeinu. And not every Yid is the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. Based on this, the Alter Rebbe answers that every single Yid has a shaykhus to Moshe Rabbeinu. To such an extent that every Yid has in his neshama, possesses within his neshama, a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu. Memele, when we're talking about Vayikra el Moshe, that there's a certain call, and this call is coming from a very, very high madrege, from such a madrege that cannot be identified by any name. And this call is El Moshe, meant us to each and every Moshe that's in each and every Yid. There's a Moshe, there's a nitzitz of Moshe, there's a spark of Moshe in each and every Yid. Especially that we're also entering the month of Nisan. The month of Nisan is also, today we bench Nisan, and next Shabbos will be Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And the Yontif of Pesach will also come out on a Shabbos. The Rebbe says, regarding Nisan, there's a Gemara. The Gemara says if somebody sees in his dream the word Nisan, or any other word that has two nuns, Nisan has two nuns. It has one nun at the beginning of the word and the other, and a longer nun at the end of the word. So the Gemara says, "Haroye nisan b'chaloymai." Nisei nisim nasuloi. That means that he can expect a multiple amount of nisim. Nisei nisim nasuloi. The Rebbe says we're entering a very, very special time. We're entering Chumash Vayikra, and we're also getting ready for the preparation of the days of Pesach. And it's the days of Nisei nisim nasuloi, when a person can expect tremendous amount of nisim. The Rebbe concluded the Farbrengen, being that we are still in the days that have a continuation to Purim. Rebbe concluded at the end of the Farbrengen that everyone should say L'chaim, even though Purim we could say L'chaim in an unlimited way, Ad lo yada, and today already we are out of these limits. We only have the Ad lo yada in its Hasidic interpretation, that it means madreges that are higher than Yediyah, higher than knowledge, referring to Sfiras HaChochma, and so forth, and yet higher than that. But nonetheless, we can still say L'chaim as a hemshich to Purim, and the Rebbe concluded that those that said L'chaim properly, so they drank a shir.
So they can now make a bracha achreina. B'toich simcha, they can make a happy bracha achreina. A good